This building was supposed to be Dimitri Bazios' retirement plan. Instead, it could force him into bankruptcy.
It's causing stress and distress and misery.
Canadian economy, already contending with inflation, tariffs, and a cost of living crisis, is also watching a steady and ongoing slump in the housing market.
For years, Toronto's skyline symbolized unstoppable growth, a city where construction cranes were as common as coffee shops, and every pre-construction billboard promised prosperity. But as of October 10th, 2025, that dream has come crashing down in slow motion. Home values have plummeted nearly 25%, wiping out more wealth than the entire housing crash of the 1990s. What started as a policy misstep has become a financial crisis reaching from corporate boardrooms to suburban kitchen tables, a generational reckoning. This is the collapse of Canada's biggest housing bubble. Toronto's real estate market didn't unravel overnight. It was built on the foundations of cheap credit and political inaction. Between 2020 and 2021, rock-bottom interest rates triggered a buying frenzy. Families, investors, and foreign buyers rushed to purchase anything with four walls. Bidding wars broke out, even for tiny condos, and the average home price surged past 1.3 million Canadian dollars. In response, politicians promised more housing supply. Ontario introduced the More Homes Built Faster plan and cut red tape for developers. But instead of increasing affordability, it fueled speculation. By 2022, internal documents from the Provincial Housing Ministry had already flagged that prices were spiraling out of control. Still, the warnings were ignored. Then came the correction. When the Bank of Canada began raising interest rates to combat inflation, it hit the housing sector like a wrecking ball. Within 2 years, mortgage rates tripled. Homeowners who once had 2% mortgages now faced renewals at rates between 4% and 5.5%. According to the Bank of Canada, nearly 60% of mortgages in Canada will reset by the end of 2026, potentially causing household payments to jump by 10% to 15%. Take a couple in Oshawa who were paying $3,000 a month in 2021. Now they could be facing $3,300 or $3,400 without any increase in income. Across the Greater Toronto Area, thousands of homeowners are stretching amortizations to 30 or even 35 years, or listing their homes to avoid default. Mortgage brokers are reporting a spike in distress calls, as many borrowers are realizing that their financial plans no longer add up. The numbers tell the story. In September 2025, active listings climbed to nearly 29,400, the highest level in years. The sales to new listings ratio dropped to 29%, meaning only 1 in every 3 homes listed actually sells. That's a textbook buyer's market. Condos, which were once the hottest assets in the city, are now losing value the fastest. Average resale condo prices have fallen 5.9% year over year. In downtown Toronto, prices per square foot have dropped from $1,400 to just $800, a staggering 40% decline. For investors who bought a single unit as a retirement plan, this translates into a $200,000 to $300,000 paper loss. Developers are feeling the squeeze too. Housing starts in Toronto dropped 44% in the first half of 2025, the steepest drop since 1998. Condo starts have plunged 60%, with many projects halted midway through construction. Major developments like Grand Central Mimico and the View Beach residences have gone into receivership, leaving behind half-finished towers fenced off from the public. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, says building activity is now at a 30-year low. Analysts warn that today's surplus could turn into tomorrow's shortage. Tens of thousands of units will flood the market in the short term, but few new projects are expected to begin in the years ahead. Inside government, signs of panic are emerging. Confidential cabinet memos leaked from Queen's Park reveal concerns about eroding public trust as housing prices fall and negative headlines multiply. Premier Doug Ford is under increasing pressure. Critics accuse his government of prioritizing developers over ordinary Ontarians. A scathing Auditor General report on the Greenbelt scandal has already highlighted issues of secrecy and favoritism. Now, many argue those same policies helped inflate a housing bubble that families are left paying for. Ford maintains that faster building remains the only real solution, but even his supporters admit that the province underestimated the scale of the market downturn. At Toronto City Hall, Mayor Olivia Cho recently announced $975 million in new spending to build 14,000 affordable homes, alongside incentives for sixplexes and laneway housing. Still, experts say it's not nearly enough. Urban planner Sharice Burda from Toronto Metropolitan University put it plainly. We built too many investor condos and not enough homes for people who actually live here. The personal stories behind the statistics are heartbreaking. A young couple who bought an $850,000 condo in 2021 now find it worth just $660,000. Their mortgage renewal letter outlines a payment increase they simply can't afford. Selling would mean locking in a six-figure loss. Staying means sacrificing a huge portion of their income just to keep the bank happy. Just one floor above them, a retired teacher who used a home equity line of credit to help her daughter buy a house in Whitby now owes more than her home is worth. I can't sleep, she admits. I worked for 40 years and did everything right. For small businesses tied to real estate, the fallout is just as painful. Construction suppliers across the GTA report a drop in orders of 30% to 40%. A framing contractor in Brampton says he's laying off workers week after week. No new projects means no work, he says. Even real estate agents are leaving the industry. The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board reports that monthly transactions are down 21% from last year. I used to close 5 deals a month, says one agent. Now I'm lucky to get one. Mortgage brokers are echoing the same story. People are desperate to refinance, but with high rates and falling appraisals, many simply don't qualify. The numbers just don't work anymore, says veteran broker Ron Butler. Investors who scooped up multiple condos during the boom are now drowning in negative cash flow. Rents have plateaued, payments are soaring, and there are few buyers in sight. Online forums are filled with landlords trying to offload units before their finances implode. Meanwhile, institutional buyers and private equity funds are circling, hunting for distressed assets priced under $700,000. Economists warn this could further shift ownership away from individual families and toward corporate landlords. And the pain isn't just limited to housing. The broader economy is feeling the pressure as more household income goes toward mortgage payments, leaving less for everything else. Consumer spending is falling. Confidence is eroding. The long boom has ended, and what's left behind is a housing crisis that touches nearly every corner of life in Toronto. Banks are tightening their grip on construction credit. Many are running internal stress tests on condo portfolios and quietly freezing loans for new developments. Economists at RBC and CIBC now warn that Ontario's economic growth could drop below 1% in 2026 if housing continues to drag down investment and employment. Even though the Bank of Canada has recently cut its interest rate to 2.5%, the relief has been slow and insufficient to cushion the blow of looming mortgage renewals. While there are hints of stability on paper, the picture remains grim. In September 2025, home sales in the Greater Toronto Area rose slightly, just 2% from the previous month, reaching 5,765 units. But prices still dipped by another 0.5%. RBC calls this a low-key fall, where a slight uptick in activity conceals deep structural weaknesses. Real estate analyst Daniel Foch argues that the market hasn't hit bottom yet. Every small rally we've seen this year disappears once new listings hit the market again, he says. The core issue remains: too much inventory and not enough qualified buyers. Experts are divided on how much further prices could fall. Some bearish forecasts predict another 10% to 15% drop by the end of 2026, especially as mortgage renewals peak. Others believe the damage could be limited if interest rates continue to fall. But there's one thing all sides agree on: the real estate boom mindset is over. The belief that property values only go up has been shattered. A recent survey by the University of Guelph found that 63% of Ontarians now consider housing a high-risk investment, up from just 22% 3 years ago. This dramatic shift in public sentiment may reshape Canadian attitudes toward wealth and housing for an entire generation. On the political front, the federal government is scrambling to show leadership. Ottawa's $6 billion Housing Accelerator Fund aims to push cities to rezone for higher density. But critics say it's too little, too late. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland still insists a soft landing is possible, citing strong immigration and employment levels as key strengths. However, immigration itself is drawing scrutiny. In 2024, population growth outpaced new housing starts by a ratio of 3-to-1, further worsening the housing crunch. Even the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, now warns that, at current rates, Canada would need 3.5 million more homes by 2030, a goal it bluntly calls mathematically impossible. Economists are increasingly worried about the ripple effect beyond Toronto. Cities like Vancouver, Calgary, and Ottawa are already showing signs of strain. In Calgary, prices have stalled after a 20% surge the year before. Vancouver's detached homes are down 9% since 2022. Nationally, the CRA's September report showed sales ticking up, but prices dropping by 2.1% month over month, the sharpest fall since 2018. For now, Toronto remains the epicenter of the crisis. The flood of half-built condos will likely keep supply high well into 2026, even though new construction has slowed to a crawl. After that, a housing shortage could return, triggering yet another cycle of boom and bust. RBC economist Robert Hogue summed it up clearly. Toronto built for investors, not residents. Now it's paying the price. But this crisis isn't just financial, it's cultural. A generation raised to believe home ownership equals security is waking up to a different reality. Homes can lose value, and debt can outlive optimism. Across Toronto, conversations that once revolved around renovation plans have shifted to concerns about simply staying afloat. In places like Scarborough's newer suburbs, for sale signs are popping up everywhere, and open houses sit half empty. Downtown, the gleaming glass towers that once symbolized ambition now flicker with dark, empty windows at night. Economists say recovery will require time and smart policy. Lower interest rates might eventually stabilize the market, but without rising incomes or cost-effective construction, any rebound could be short-lived. Developers warn that labor shortages and high material costs make building truly affordable housing nearly impossible, even if financing becomes available. Renters are facing their own struggles. Despite cooling demand for condos, average rent in the GTA remains 18% higher than pre-pandemic levels. As 2025 draws to a close, the big questions are getting louder. How far will prices fall? How many families will be forced out of their homes? Can developers survive another year of stalled sales? There are no easy answers, but analysts, lenders, and homeowners all seem to agree. Toronto is in the middle of its most painful housing correction in modern history. The easy money era is over. The illusion of endless growth has crumbled. For many Canadians, the lesson is clear, though hard to accept. When speculation overtakes fundamentals, reality eventually catches up. And now, Toronto is learning that truth in real time. A city built on borrowed confidence is now dealing with the consequences of the bill finally coming due. On the geopolitical front, a shockwave has just hit Ottawa. China has gone public with a direct offer. If Canada removes its 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, Beijing will immediately lift its retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola products. The message wasn't delivered quietly. It was loud, clear, and public. For Canadian farmers, small businesses, and consumers, this could be the most important trade decision in a generation. As of October 12, 2025, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government faces a pivotal choice: continue aligning with Washington's protectionist stance, or start negotiating trade terms based on Canada's own national interest. The timing couldn't be worse for Canadian agriculture. China's tariffs, imposed earlier in 2025, have severely restricted access to one of Canada's largest export markets. duties as high as 75.8% on canola seed and 100% on canola oil and meal have devastated the sector. Before these tariffs, China was Canada's second largest canola buyer, accounting for over 40% of total exports, worth nearly $5 billion annually. Now, that market is virtually closed. Across the prairies, farmers are struggling. Storage bins are overflowing. Prices have dropped. Many are nearing financial collapse. Rick White, president of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, put it bluntly. "We've got full bins, no buyers, and bills stacking up. Producers in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta report that local elevators are filled to capacity, forcing them to sit on unsold crops for months. China's new offer may be politically complicated, but economically, it's significant." The question now is whether Canada will respond pragmatically or allow farmers and exporters to remain collateral damage in a wider geopolitical standoff. Cash flow has all but dried up for many canola producers, and banks are pulling back on lending. A growing number of farmers now depend on government assistance just to keep going. But even that support can't make up for the massive losses caused by losing access to the Chinese market. The impact runs deep. It's not just farmers hurting, but also the thousands of small businesses, equipment dealers, truckers, and seed suppliers whose livelihoods depend on the canola trade. This crisis began with Canada's decision to follow the United States in imposing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles in late 2024. The move mirrored Washington's protectionist stance, which was justified with claims of unfair subsidies and national security risks. But for Canada, the consequences have been largely symbolic and, many argue, self-defeating. The tariff hasn't sparked a domestic EV manufacturing boom, nor has it meaningfully protected Canadian consumers. Instead, it has blocked access to affordable Chinese EVs that would have sold for around $35,000 to $40,000, significantly less than most North American alternatives. By aligning with US policy, Canada effectively shut itself out of competitively priced clean technology while gaining little in return. In contrast, countries like the United Kingdom, Australia, and many across Europe have welcomed Chinese EVs. These nations have offered their consumers low-cost, high-quality options and seen green vehicle adoption soar. In the UK, Chinese brands like BYD and MG are now among the best-selling electric cars. The vehicles themselves aren't the problem, it's the political baggage surrounding them. Ottawa's decision to mimic Washington's tariffs has now left Canada grappling with inflated car prices, struggling farmers, and a growing trade deficit. China's retaliation was strategic and targeted. Beijing went straight for Canada's agricultural heartland, one of the sectors least equipped to withstand a long-term market shutdown. When Prime Minister Mark Carney visited Beijing in September 2025, alongside Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, the meetings were described as constructive. But no resolution came out of them. Carney emphasized Canada's interest in fair trade. Chinese officials, however, were clear. The canola dispute began in Ottawa, not Beijing, when Canada imposed the EV tariff. And if Canada removes that tariff, China is prepared to lift its own restrictions on Canadian agricultural products. Beijing's message was simple: reciprocity. Drop the EV tariffs, and China will immediately reopen its market to Canadian canola. The proposal wasn't framed as a threat, but as an opportunity to reset trade relations on more practical, mutually beneficial terms. Back home, pressure is building on the federal government. A recent national poll shows that 57% of Canadians support reducing or eliminating the EV tariff if it means restoring access to the Chinese market. Only 24% oppose the idea. Support is even stronger in the prairie provinces, with 68% in Saskatchewan, 61% in Manitoba, and 60% in Alberta backing a deal. Politically, this is not a partisan issue. Across the spectrum, from Liberals to Conservatives to the NDP, a majority of voters say it's time for Ottawa to put Canadian interests first. As Premier Scott Moe put it, "We can't keep losing billions for the sake of symbolism. Farmers can't pay their bills with political loyalty." Meanwhile, Canada's auto sector is quietly sounding its own alarms. Flavio Volpe, president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, says carmakers and suppliers are experiencing cash flow problems as trade uncertainty grows. The 100% tariff on Chinese EVs has closed the door on investment opportunities that could have brought new manufacturing partnerships to Canada. Smaller firms, especially those building EV components, say they'd be open to joint ventures with Chinese automakers, as long as Ottawa creates clear rules to protect Canadian interests. As one Quebec-based entrepreneur explained, "We don't need to give up our market. We need to make it work for us. Let them build here, hire our workers, and use our aluminum and lithium. That's how you win." Such an approach could help restore trade balance with China, while creating jobs and modernizing Canada's automotive industry. Still, some critics warn that accepting China's offer could carry political risks. They worry that opening the door to Chinese EVs could overwhelm the domestic market with cheaper imports and weaken innovation. Others argue it may be seen as a concession, undermining Canada's alignment with Western allies. Even so, many skeptics acknowledge that the current path is unsustainable. Canadian farmers are paying the price for a trade war they didn't start, and one they can't win. Time and again, blindly following Washington's lead has cost Canada. From steel and aluminum tariffs to softwood lumber disputes, Canadian workers and industries have consistently taken the hit. Economists argue that removing the EV tariff wouldn't be a sign of weakness. It would be a sign of independence. It would show that Canada can make trade decisions based on its own needs, not just US strategy. From a practical standpoint, it would also reflect economic reality. China's EV industry is now the world's most advanced and cost-efficient, with production costs roughly 30% lower than most Western automakers. Keeping these vehicles out of Canada doesn't protect consumers or the industry. It simply deprives Canadians of access to cleaner, more affordable transportation options. A phased solution could offer a middle ground. In the first 6 months, Canada could suspend the EV tariff on a limited number of models under strict import quotas. In return, China would suspend its tariffs on Canadian canola. In the second phase, Chinese EV manufacturers could partner with Canadian firms to build or assemble vehicles locally, creating jobs and securing control over key technology. By the third phase, full tariff normalization could be established under a clear bilateral framework for transparency and dispute resolution. This kind of structured deal could transform a damaging trade dispute into a balanced economic recovery. But this decision is about more than just economics. It carries symbolic weight. For decades, Canada's trade identity has been defined by its reliance on the US market. This moment presents an opportunity to chart a different course, one based on Canada's own strategic interests, built through pragmatic diplomacy and economic self-confidence. As Washington embraces increasingly protectionist policies, Canada's future depends on building new alliances and reducing its over-reliance on the United States. China needs what Canada has to offer: energy, critical minerals, agricultural products, just as Canada needs broader access to global markets. There's clear potential for mutual gain, based on cooperation and shared benefit rather than automatic alignment with foreign powers. Prime Minister Mark Carney has publicly stated that Canada must strike a balance between competition and collaboration in today's changing global landscape. The proposed EV canola deal represents exactly that kind of opportunity. Yet, Ottawa continues to hesitate, weighed down by fears of offending Washington. Those concerns are only growing as Donald Trump's second term fuels a wave of tariff-driven nationalism across North America. But Canada needs to take a hard look at reality. The US has never hesitated to act unilaterally when it suits its interests. When America imposed tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum and lumber, there were no exemptions, no compensation, and certainly no apologies. Why then should Canada continue to absorb the costs of trade battles it didn't start? In the prairie provinces, frustration is boiling over. Farmers' associations are now organizing protests in front of Parliament, demanding immediate action. They're calling out the contradiction in federal policy, offering bailouts for farm losses while refusing the very trade compromise that could end the crisis. "We don't need another bailout," said one Alberta farmer. "We need our markets back." That sentiment is gaining traction across the country, with many Canadians seeing current trade policy as more about political posturing than economic common sense. If Ottawa accepted China's offer, the benefits would be immediate. It would ease pressure on struggling farmers, lower the cost of electric vehicles for consumers, and help rebalance Canada's trade portfolio. More importantly, it would send a strong message that Canada is capable of negotiating based on its own interests, not just following Washington's lead. Refusing the deal, on the other hand, would mean deeper losses, more bankruptcies on the farm, higher prices at the dealership, and a growing perception that Canada lacks the resolve to shape its own economic future. This moment goes beyond canola and electric vehicles. It's a test of whether Canada can stand independently in a world increasingly divided by great power rivalry. China's proposal is not an act of goodwill. It's a recognition of Canada's strategic value. The world's second-largest economy wants access to Canada's critical minerals and technology. Canada wants access to their markets and affordable green innovation. The logic is clear. The benefits are mutual. What's missing is the political courage to act. Every time Canada has tied its trade policy to the shifting moods of Washington, it has paid the price. The current tariff standoff is a rare opportunity to change course, to stop reacting and start leading. As one Saskatchewan farmer put it, "We've played by someone else's rules long enough. It's time to play for ourselves." Ultimately, this is more than just a trade disagreement. It's a turning point for Canadian sovereignty. Will Ottawa seize the opportunity to chart its own path? Or will it remain tethered to decisions made in another capital? Accepting China's offer could breathe new life into the prairies, lower costs for Canadian families, and prove to the world that Canada can stand as an independent economic force. Refusing it risks more lost harvests, higher prices, and a future dictated by someone else's agenda. The world is watching. History will remember which path Canada chooses.